Welcome back. Not as woolly as I was the past couple of days. It was getting quite unruly. I figured since it's Easter and I'm kind of presenting myself to a lot of people, I might as well just kind of shape myself down. So, happy Easter to whoever celebrates it. If you don't, I just hope you're having a fantastic weekend. So let's talk about some records. So overall, it's a pretty good week for music, besides one record, but we'll get to that. So let's start off with probably the biggest drop of the week, which is Beyonce with Cowboy Carter. So the general reception and critical perception is pretty par for the course at this point. That's being said, it's been very positive. So it's an 87% and a user score of a 79% on Album of the Year. So this album is getting very highly regarded, like Renaissance was, like the past couple albums that Beyonce has released have gotten. And what I can say about this record is that I'm impressed. In my before the drop video, I did expect this to be not like a full-on country record, but very rooted in country. And you get a couple detours. I can think of Yeah Yeah with a little bit more of the Pharrell kind of backing, kind of instrumentation, and the vocals, especially in the latter portion of that song, but especially Spaghetti with Swiss beats kind of through there as well. It does allow for these very interesting detours and segues into what is a very majorly country album. But with Beyonce, she brings the incredible vocals. The songwriting is fantastic. It's a little bit more personal. When I think of songs like Daughter and when I think of songs like Protector, these are some more genuine kind of sides to Beyonce that we have been starting to get for the past few years. But we didn't really get that much on Renaissance. But here, the country genre has been known to be very honest, has been able to be very personal, and I feel like Beyonce is able to bring that personality and that kind of just getting a glimpse into someone's life with this genre. I think it does work out very well in this case. The features bring a nice little bit of variety, and Post Malone and Miley Cyrus do bring a good amount of their charisma and a good amount of what makes them kind of good in the genres that they are in. Miley Cyrus, I remember, she kind of jumps around genres all over the place, and while I feel like sometimes she really doesn't stick the landing in the country genre, I feel like that's where she's the most at home. That sound and also the glam rock kind of genre she was going for, I believe it was with Crystal Hearts or something, that kind of record. And then Post Malone, this is probably his first foray and kind of idea of what he can do with a country sound. And when I first heard it, I didn't even recognize it was Post, but he sounded very good. But there was a lot of great songs on this record. The big problem with this record, though, is that it is 27 tracks long. So it is a very long listen. And while the album is not like an hour and a half long or an hour and 45 minutes, the idea of 27 tracks still feels very big and very gargantuan to get through. Even though this record does seem to fly by pretty nicely whenever you're listening to it, 27 tracks, when you look at it just from an eyesight of just looking how big this album is, it can make it daunting to come back on repeated listens. But what I do appreciate about this record as well is that it does flow pretty good. You get some really nice interludes, and it's kind of is almost like going through these legends of country, these legends of the genre, and just Beyonce kind of navigating through the genre and having these kind of amazing legendary country artists kind of work themselves into the story of this record. My favorite song is probably the cover of Jolene. One of the best covers I have heard in a very long time. Beyonce's vocals are fantastic. The guitar work is just incredible. This is like taking the amazing parts of that original song, but bringing it to a modern lens, bringing it to a modern kind of production, but making it sound so good. So overall, I did really enjoy this record. Again, I feel like the length of this record is going to cause the return value or the replay value to suffer. Kind of the same thing that happened with Renaissance, to be honest, for me, but at this current state, at this current moment, it's kind of on the same level as Renaissance for me. So with that, it gets a really fat 8 out of 10. As you can see, it's hard to see, it's kind of green, but that's how I'm kind of feeling on this record so far. So we jump from a pretty quality record to Mgk and Trippie Red with Genre Sad Boy. And if you can't tell by the user score, No one really likes to sing at 17%. And listening to this record, I also really do not like this record. And I kind of had the expectations that this album was not going to be good off the jump. But what I didn't expect is that this album kind of sounds more like a Trippie Redd record than an MGK record, where you still get those little bit of moments of punk and a little bit more of rock, but it's really muted and it really does not have any bite to it whatsoever. I'm thinking about just the lyrics on this thing, especially, I think it's called Time Travel. Time Travel is probably one of my least favorite songs of the year, and it has some really stereotypical and some really gaudy writing. I can think of one line where MGK says is that when I die, bury me in Cleveland with my fangs on. I was just like, when you really think of where MGK came from, where he was like a battle rapper when he was rapping really fast, he was a really confident rapper too, to kind of harken back to where he came from and to take this punk aesthetic, it just sounds so not genuine. And Trippie Redd kind of is trying to find his spot in this record of to get into that punk aesthetic, to get into the writing that MGK has been doing for the past little bit. This record is kind of just MGK kind of going for the same motions that he's been doing for the past couple of records, and Trippie Redd is just there. That's kind of what this record is, especially when it comes to the songwriting. Time Travel as well has this really weird instrumental where there is a gun cocking throughout the entire beat. Not for the entire beat, but a half point. But it just gives this feeling that this record has just like this fake edge. And it really just shows that MGK and Trippie Redd are kind of using this punk aesthetic as more of a pastiche than it is being more genuine. Now, is there moments on here that do feel genuine? One, one I can think of. It's the last track where MGK does bring a pretty heartfelt and pretty genuine verse, and it definitely feels something that was serious. It feels something that was kind of close to the heart, and I can totally give MGK that credit for being able to actually dive into kind of the emotions and the introspectiveness on this song and actually bring something that is interesting, that is thought-provoking, and is personal. There's moments on here that can do that, but a majority of this record just feels like, again, it's a pastiche of punk rock. It's a pastiche of this kind of punk rap kind of crossover that's been happening for the past couple of years. The record is only about 27 minutes long, but it does feel like it drags. There's a random JID feature on this thing. I remember I was listening to this album and I was about to fall asleep, but then when JID showed up, I completely forgot he was on this record. My eyes just opened wide. I was just like, wait a minute, JID is on this record. And JID brings probably his most forgettable feature I have heard in a long time. And I don't think JID has given a forgettable performance, but it kind of works because he's not even featured on this thing and he just kind of falls to the background. So overall, this album is not good. It kind of, again, is just more of playing costume party with the punk and rap kind of crossover that we've been seeing. MGK, again, is just really phoning it in with his performances and kind of just playing into those stereotypes of punk. And Trippie, while sometimes he has a good vocal performance, I feel like he's just along for the ride and phoning it in as well. So when we take a look at this record as a whole, it is a 2 out of 10. It is not good. It probably is going to show up on one of my worst albums of the year lists. It is something that, again, it feels at the beginning of when I was doing this discussion, it feels like it's just really neutered. It feels like it's not like as chaotic as you think this combination should be, especially considering when you have MGK, who did Tickets to My Downfall, who did Mainstream Sellout, which say as much as you want about those records, but they still had at least the kinetic energy that punk had. And then when you think of Trippie Redd with Neon Shark, he also captured that decently well. So if you're expecting something that's going to be balls to the wall or something that's going to be very kind of rebellious or kind of punky, I don't think you'll really get it off of this record. Again, it just feels very muted. It feels like something that is punching well under its weight. So now we move on to Blue with Out of the Blue. So I was surprised with the user score of this thing, which is at a 63. This is my first Blue album. And this album probably surprised me the most. I really, really like this record. The beats on here are sometimes groovy, they're sometimes kind of video gamey, and then sometimes they can be just trunk knockingly aggressive. I can think of LA Summer and I can think of I'm G OMG. Those, especially LA Summer and I'm G OMG, just have such this grit and this kind of just guttural kind of feel to them that they feel something from the streets. But then you get into the kind of middle portion of the record where it feels kind of summery, it feels kind of vibey, it feels kind of smooth, and Blue is just riding through this fantastically throughout all these instrumentals. And this album kind of plays a story and also paints a portrait of LA when it comes to gang violence, when it comes to gang activities, gang affiliations. And the way that I listen to this record is that it starts off with kind of these news broadcasters kind of giving you an idea of what the gang life is like. And then you're also get ideas of just LA life in general, where it's always hot, the beaches, going out. And there's kind of a little point in the record where the news broadcasters are talking about the gangs are coming together and they're kind of forming solidarity, and it's something that's sticking. But once you get to the latter portion of the record, it's starting to fall apart again, and it kind of brings this cycle of just gang violence, trying to find resolution, trying to find peace, but only to bring back to the cycle of violence. And I think this album, especially through its interludes, especially through its outros, really gives this feeling of building a story and building the hostility, the beauty, and trying to mend the pieces together of just LA. And maybe it's just a portrait of America in general, that we're just constantly in this cycle of violence, and no matter how much we're trying to change it, how much we're trying to fix the issue, it always just keeps cycling around and around. It's just what's going to break the cycle. And that's just it's a really interesting record, but it tackles it in such a very kind of authentic and genuine way that I really enjoy. And again, Blue does a great job of narrating through this thing. There are so many guest features on here too. All of them deliver personality. All of them deliver some great verses. And this is probably my biggest surprise of the night once again. And I really enjoyed this record. It's probably one of my favorite rap records of the year at the moment. And with that, I am giving it another 8 out of 10, and I'm going to be returning to this record a lot. Probably I'm G, OMG, and LA Summer are two of my favorite tracks of the year. So I highly recommend this Blue record. And the last record we're going to be talking about is Gesaffelstein with Gamma. So it has a user score of a 69. A lot of these albums, again, I did this video rather early. So a lot of these records don't have critic scores yet. But this was also my first dive into Gesaffelstein besides the weekend production on My Dear Melancholy. And this record was another surprise for me. Now, it's not going to blow your mind. It's not going to be one of the best records of the year, in my opinion. But what I really like about this record is that it kind of has this really dark, dystopian, futuristic new wave kind of sound that kind of sounds a little bit kind of poppy at some points, but it's kind of drenched in this dystopian kind of metallic and kind of gludgy kind of atmosphere. And the electronics of this album are really dark. They're really kind of just soaked in this like darkness and soaked in this kind of machinery and metallic feel. But it really sounds pretty cool, and it reminds me again a lot of the new wave albums from the 80s, but it brings a dystopian and futuristic twist to it. It's a really interesting album. Now, it is actually only about 27 minutes long, and that's the unfortunate part of this record, is that when you start to actually get into the sound, it's already too late and it's done. And I was really hoping that I was going to get a lot more of this sound, because it was really starting to get into something pretty interesting. And just overall, like, it's still a really good record, but I feel like this could have been explored so much more. You could have made this album even like 45 minutes, and you could have got a really good experience out of this thing. But overall, it's still a decent record. This is the one that I probably have the least to talk about. It's good, but I feel like there needs to be more to be explored on this record. And with it being so short, it kind of hurts its replay value, because it doesn't go far enough. It doesn't explore this sound enough. So with that, I didn't really put a rating thing on the side here, but I had this at a 7. But the more I think about it, the more that I kind of wish there was more to this thing. So I'm actually going to give it a 6 out of 10 instead, and I feel like that's probably where it's going to stay. So we have had, I forgot to change this to aftermath because I just kept all the same things here because why not? But this has been my aftermath. Overall, a pretty decent week, albeit one kind of glaring issue in the middle here, kind of sandwiched in. But March is officially done. We've had a lot of records that dropped in March, a lot of really great records that dropped in March. So expect my top albums of March to come out in the next couple of days. And I'll be thinking of some more ideas coming up of content and coming up with videos in the future. So thank you very much for watching. Again, happy Easter. If you don't celebrate that, that's cool. And I hope you have a fantastic weekend, and I'll catch you later.